Hello everybody, my name is Happy and I'd like to welcome you all to my History Reaction channel. Today, we're going to be looking at the crisis of the 3rd century in the Roman Empire by Kings and Generals. As always, I will include a link to the original content in the description down below. So why this video? Well, we just did the 3 kingdoms from Oversimplified, and in that video I mentioned that while the China was descending into chaos and then reforming into the 3 kingdoms, and then finally the brand new Jin dynasty, over on the other side of the world, Rome was going through a crisis of its own, and that's the crisis of the 3rd century. So I decided to see if there were any good videos on that, and what do you know, Kings and Generals did one, and it's been a little bit since we visited King and Generals, so I thought we'd take a look at this. So let's just dive right into this and let's learn a little bit more about the crisis in the 3rd century. That just seemed to be a century for major powers to fall apart.
Throughout its existence, the Roman state lived through many periods of troubles, but none of them were as dangerous as the crisis of the 3rd century. The empire was
Well, I would argue that there was one that was more dangerous, and that's the one that saw the end of the Roman Empire, but by definition, but I get what he means.
being torn to pieces by internal strife, and enemies from all sides were eager to steal its lands. In this video, we are going to talk about the crisis of the 3rd century, how it occurred, what happened, and the aftermath. After a series of civil wars that shook the foundations of the Republic, in 31 BC, Gaius Octavian defeated Mark Antony at the Battle of Actium
Augustus.
and became the first emperor of Rome. Although we call him the emperor, his real title was Princeps, which means the first citizen, and a quasi-republican rule continued. The empire was living in relative peace until in 68 AD, a coup forced Nero to commit suicide. This resulted in a crisis that was later called the Year of the Four Emperors.
Yeah, so take a look at these emperors here. You have Augustus. He starts it all basically as far as the empire goes. Tiberius, super paranoid, and for good reason, because he's about to be succeeded by Caligula, who is assassinated by his Praetorian Guard. The Praetorian Guard is then going to set up, why did I say the Praetorian Guard? They didn't kill Caligula. What they did do, however, is when Caligula was killed, they set up Claudius as the new emperor. It had been the senators again that had killed Caligula. I'd seen Claudius and Praetorian Guard got into my mind. Sorry about that, guys. And then, of course, Nero at the end. So this is the Julio-Claudian dynasty, and that's pretty much the extent of it.
And in the summer of 69, Vespasian became the emperor and established the Flavian dynasty. 3 representatives of this family, and 5 members of the Nerva-Antonine dynasty, collectively known as the 5 Good Emperors, ruled during the following period of stability.
Alright, so when you look at all of these that were assassinated, those are the ones that were more brutally assassinated. There is reason to believe that a lot of these other ones may have been poisoned. Claudius comes to mind, Tiberius comes to mind. Certainly there was a lot of theories that they had been poisoned. Whether that actually happened or not, who knows?
During the rule of Emperor Trajan, the empire reached its greatest extent territorially. His heir, Hadrian, decided to stop the expansion and built a number of defensive fortifications. The next emperor, Marcus Aurelius, had to fight a prolonged conflict called the Marcomannic Wars against the barbarian tribes, but despite this, his reign is considered to be a golden age for Rome. His son, Commodus, started his rule well, but later on his paranoia led to his assassination, and in 192, the Year of the 5 Emperors began. The winner of the ensuing struggle for power was Septimus Severus. His Severan dynasty ruled for the next 4 decades, providing 7 emperors. This time was marked with an increase in the size of the military. The regular army was doubled in size and had been promised 50% higher pay. The Severan emperors had to decrease the percentage of silver in their coins to be able to pay for this bigger army. And
right. So during this period, one of the things that's going to be a big problem is the debasement of the currency. They're going to silver coins are no longer going to be pure silver. They're going to be something else like copper or bronze or brass, coated with a light coat of silver. So it greatly devalues the silver coins, which leads to massive inflation and a distrust of the money, and that never works out good. When we were talking about Russian history in the Carhardt's Bad Translations, I mentioned the copper riots in Moscow. Similar concept, where they had debased the coins, and that ended up causing riots and rebellions because the coins lost their value.
That started a protracted economic crisis. The role of the military increased tenfold, while the Senate lost its privileges. In 232, the last Severan emperor, Alexander Severus, had to fight against the newly formed Sassanid Empire, which had toppled the Parthians.
So the Sassanid Empire is forming in Persia, primarily Iran and the surrounding areas, and it's going to be a pretty major power in this period. Just like in China, when I mentioned it in the Three Kingdoms, I did mention that that was also a period of intense famine and disease, particularly plagues and epidemics. Well, the same thing goes for over here. I'm not so sure if there was any I'm sure there was a major famine this time too, but I know there was a lot of disease. There was some major outbreaks during the 3rd century in Rome.
We know very little about this war against Ardashir I, but it seems that despite some setbacks, the territories of the empire were preserved. However, casualties had been very high, and the military had become insubordinate, especially towards Alexander. When he seemed reluctant to fight against Germanic invaders in 235, he was murdered by his own legionaries.
Oops.
Thus started the crisis of the 3rd century. The monetary crisis ramped up, and the army became the only real source of power. Around 30 so-called barrack emperors or soldier emperors were crowned in the next 50 years.
Sound familiar? There really does seem to be something in the air in this century that's causing these warlords to form in multiple parts of the world at once, and making plays for power.
At the same time, the empire was facing a greater number of foreign enemies than ever before. The Goths, Vandals, and Alemanni started raiding the provinces along the Rhine-Danube frontiers, while to the east, the Sassanid Empire was eager to exploit Roman weakness to take control over the Levant. In 252, Shapur I seized Nisibis, and during the next year defeated the Roman army sent to the area at Barbalissos and conquered Antioch. Emperor Valerian had to march against the Sassanids to keep the eastern territories intact, while his son Gallienus was left in charge of the west. Valerian's troops arrived in Asia Minor in 259, but at that moment Gothic tribes invaded the region. Sources do not provide any information on the ensuing battles, and it is possible that the Goths rampaged through Asia Minor and then returned beyond the Danube. Valerian continued his march towards Edessa, which was under siege by Shapur I. Once again, we don't know the details, but Valerian's 70,000 strong army was utterly defeated by the 40,000 soldiers of Shapur. Valerian became the first Roman emperor to be captured in battle. He passed away a year later. His son Gallienus claimed the throne, but he had to quell a rebellion against his rule in 260. At the same time, the Alemanni and other Germanic tribes invaded northern Italy. The emperor was forced to march back to stop them. His troops intercepted the enemy near Mediolanum. It is said that Gallienus only had 60,000 troops against the 300,000 barbarians, but his cavalry won the day. However, rebellions against him continued, and in 260 Roman commander Postumus declared his independence and formed what was later called the Gallic Empire in Gaul and Britannia. he used the fact that Gallienus was off fighting other usurpers to also take control of Hispania. Thankfully for the Romans, their eastern provinces were saved from the Sassanid invasion by a noble from the city of Palmyra called Odenathus, who sources claim was the governor of Syria during the Battle of Edessa. He defeated a number of local usurpers and was able to pacify the Roman East. In 262 and 263, Odenathus took back all the lands lost to the Sassanids and even reached their capital, Ctesiphon.
Interesting.
Odenathus then declared himself
I didn't know about that one.
the King of Kings, thus challenging the Sassanids' legitimacy while remaining a Roman vassal. Details are obscure once again, but we know that in 267, Odenathus was assassinated in Anatolia and his widow Zenobia became the regent of their son.
Okay, I've heard of Zenobia.
Meanwhile, to the west, Postumus managed to defend his new realm against Gallienus in 265 and 266. This probably caused discontent among the legions of the Roman Emperor, and in 268 he was assassinated and Claudius II took the throne.
Alright.
Claudius needed to regain the Gallic provinces, but a Gothic incursion into modern-day Serbia forced him to move against them instead. In 269 he defeated the invaders at Naissus. Sources assert that more than 50,000 Goths were killed, and that was the reason why they were only able to attack Rome a century later. Claudius also managed to stop another Alemanni raid at the Battle of Lake Benacus in 269. In the same year, Postumus was killed and was succeeded by Marius. Claudius exploited the Gallic Empire's weakness and took Hispania back. However, he wasn't able to conclude the reconquest as he succumbed to a plague in 270. Aurelian became the emperor shortly after.
Here's the big one. So Aurelian is going to be the one that saves the day. So, yeah, we're getting about the same time that the Three Kingdoms comes to an end. So, yeah, it's just so many similarities here. There's a lot of differences too, but I just find it so interesting that all of this is going on at the same time the Three Kingdoms is happening over in China.
In the east,
Well, the Three Kingdoms and everything leading up to them.
Zenobia decided to take advantage of Claudius's death and declare her son the emperor. By 271, Egypt and most of central and eastern Anatolia became part of the Palmyran Empire. Aurelian was under pressure from all sides. He started by expelling the Vandals from northern Italy, and then defeated another Alemanni incursion at the battles of Fano and Pavia. At the same time, he decided to abandon the province of Dacia, as it was exposed to attack, being beyond the Danube. The Palmyran conquest of Egypt created a grain crisis in Rome. Aurelian needed to deal with
Egypt would have been the breadbasket of Rome for this period, for pretty much the entire part of the empire. That's one reason they fought so hard to keep control of Egypt. Egypt was a major breadbasket region for the empire. So lose Egypt, you lose access to a lot of your corn, which is your grains.
Zenobia, so in 272 he marched to the east. In less than a year, Palmyran forces were defeated, and the eastern part of the empire was reconquered. Some sources claim that part of the Library of Alexandria was burned during this campaign.
What is it with everybody wanting to burn the Library of Alexandria? Can't you guys give that poor library a break?
Aurelian then returned to the west. Initially, he attempted to use diplomacy to reclaim the Gallic Empire. This failed, and in 274 he attacked them and won the Battle of Chalons. This once again brought Gaul and Britannia under Roman control. Although the Roman Empire was reunited, the death of Aurelian in 275 started a new round of the crisis.
Jeez.
6 emperors came to power in the next 9 years, until Diocletian defeated all opposition and became the empire's ruler in 284. Diocletian's reign is considered to be the end of the crisis of the 3rd century. Although it was as full of warfare and violence as the previous 5 decades, Diocletian managed to stabilize the empire with his reforms. A general census was conducted that helped with taxation. The emperor also attempted to enact an edict setting maximum prices, but it backfired as the black market effectively took over. His most important reform was the creation of the tetrarchy. The empire was divided into the eastern and western halves. Each got an emperor, Augustus, and both emperors appointed their heirs, Caesars. The goal was to create a stable inheritance system. Despite the fact that the tetrarchy failed shortly after the death of Diocletian, the Western and Eastern Roman empires became the standard division, and that prolonged the existence of the Roman Empire. Thank you for watching our documentary on the crisis of the 3rd century. We would like to express our gratitude to our Patreon supporters who make the creation of these videos possible.
That was pretty good. That was fairly basic, straightforward. I would have liked to have seen a little bit more detail, but I knew it wasn't going to be detailed given the length of the video. So that was informative enough. It was interesting. Very complicated period. And one that I think maybe in the future we'll revisit and get a little more detail in. But that was a great overview. So thank you, Kings and Generals. And thank you guys for watching. And I will see you all next time. Until then, bye-bye.